Good evening, everyone, and welcome to day one of our Salesforce Sales Cloud. And tonight, we're going to be looking into sales practices and implementation strategies. Okay, before we start, the expectations are you shouldn't be doing this if you are currently looking for a job. You should be focused on your job search, your work experience, and the likes, okay? This meeting is particularly for those that are currently actively working within Salesforce or have some experience in Salesforce. I'll be very fast, but by fast, I don't mean I'm going to rush through things. However, I would assume you know certain things within the Salesforce, okay? So without wasting much time, let's go into the details of what we're going to be learning, or according to Salesforce, what we expected to know, okay? Everything I'm going to be teaching here is found on the Trailhead website, okay? And Salesforce Sales Cloud certification. The exam guide for Sales Cloud certifications can be found on the official Salesforce website. And as you can see, it's broken down into some bits, which include the sales practices, implementation strategies, application of product knowledge, lead management, account and contact management, opportunity management, sales productivity and integration, consulting practices, sales metric, reports and dashboards, and data management. Also, you can see the percentage allocated to each and every session. Again, this is an accelerated training, and the expectations are you should be familiar with some of the Salesforce concepts, okay? Without wasting much time, I will go through some of the things Salesforce expects us to know from the Sales Cloud. First, Salesforce expects us to know, given a scenario, assess the factors that influence sales metrics, key performance indicators, and business challenges, okay? In addition to that, you need to describe common sales and marketing processes and key implementation considerations. Also, Salesforce wants you to know the Sales Cloud features, such as the high velocity sales, the Salesforce inbox, Salesforce maps, and the Sales Cloud hosting. Also, you need to understand how to facilitate a successful consulting engagement, the plan, gather requirement, design, build, test, deploy, and documentation. In addition, you need to understand or determine appropriate sales deployment considerations, okay? And lastly, analyze the success of an implementation project. Some of you might be familiar with some of the things I'll be saying, and some of the things I'll be saying might be similar to what you learned in your Service Cloud, okay? There are some similarities. However, there are some specific contents that are relevant to the Sales Cloud, okay? So now, when it comes to the key items we're going to be going through tonight, we're going to be going through sales metric, performance indicator, business challenges. We're going to be going through the sales process and methods, phases and activities of a consulting project, component of project phases, challenges of consulting engagement, type of licenses, deployment strategies, how to measure adoption, and analyzing success of an implementation, okay? Again, you're expected to be thinking along being a consultant. So when you're given a task at work or when you're going for a consulting gig, always put this at the bottom of your consultation engagement, okay? So ideally, you should watch this video, or you should have some of the key things or experience about some of the key things here before you should go for a consulting gig, okay? So now let's go into sales metrics. What are sales metrics and why are sales metrics important? Generally, metrics are just data points. I want to improve sales. I want to increase revenues. I want to achieve certain goals. For you to achieve those goals, you need to measure some data points. And the sales metrics in this context are just data points that measure and evaluate a team, individual, company sales performance over a period of time. So the metrics are not just data points. They are data point that measures. So if you're not measuring the data point, if you just get, okay, we made a sale today. A sale today is not a sales metric. It's just one data point. But if you measure sales for a week, then you are measuring a sales metric. Okay? So sales metric and data points, they're two different things, but the collection of those data points is what makes it a sales metric. In addition, sales metric can be used to gauge performance. Okay? So when you're collecting data, the idea behind collecting data is to measure performance. You want to see how well you're doing. So if you are not growing or if you are stagnant, then you want to improve on areas that are not working. But in terms of sales metric, it has to be related to sales. So don't go and start measuring service performance. Don't go and start measuring security performance, user performance. No, it has nothing to do with sales. Sales are specifically things that accumulate together to bring about a particular growth, even decline in an organization. And that mostly has to do with money, revenue, okay? Customers and stuff like that. So going further, what are the typical sales metrics you're expected to know from a Salesforce point of view? From a Salesforce point of view, you want to talk about the leads. Why are the leads associated to sales? Because the leads are where your customers are coming from. And your customers are the ones that buy the products. So when it comes to sales metric in Salesforce, you want to focus on lead. For lead management, you want to talk about the numbers of leads converted. As you can see, this stuff is no-brainer. But then again, you need to understand that it's not just about the count of leads. Count of leads is easy. It's like your ABC. I just know the number of leads in the system. But how many leads are converted? The number of prospects that are converted into sales opportunity is a sales metric you can measure. So it's not just about the count of leads. It's not just about how many leads you created today, but it's about the number of leads converted. In addition to that, you want to measure lead qualification score. So what does it entail to have a score on a lead? You know, typically lead from any source could just be a lead to you guys. But then again, when you're doing business, not all leads are the same. If I go to a school or I go to an organization and I pitch Blackforce to that organization, and I told them that Blackforce can provide training for your customers, or Blackforce can provide training for your employee. And for you to be part of that training, please complete this form and a member of Blackforce team would get back to you. That's a lead. But the source of that lead is different compared to a lead that is coming from a generic website, someone that looks us up on LinkedIn and completes a form that says reserve a spot. That's also a lead, but that lead has no background to it compared to someone that we go out there to pitch to. So the way you identify a lead, the source a lead is coming from, the way a lead came through your organization, and some data points about a lead can be used as a metric to identify or qualify a lead. What I'm trying to say here is not all leads are equal. Some leads are qualified based on where they're coming from. If you pay for a LinkedIn subscription today and you advertise through LinkedIn, your lead will be different from the lead that are coming through Facebook. So you want to score LinkedIn leads a little bit higher if you are an academic or you are a training school compared to TikTok lead. Even though they are all leads, but the quality of that lead is different, okay? So lead qualification score, it was determine the quality of leads based on several factors, such as the interest and accuracy of the contact information. Again, I talk about lead source. Lead source are very important because the lead source determines how valuable a lead is. If you pay for a lead, it is much, I wouldn't say it's much valuable, but chances are the leads are more qualified because you've targeted that lead compared to a lead that generally came through your website and fill a form or came through the phone or some random places, okay? So these are an example of a sales metric. We also have sales metric on opportunity. Remember, we're talking about sales, and sales is very vast, yet it is very concise in terms of the things, the elements that are involved when it comes to sales. For instance, in Salesforce generally, sales are typically your lead objects, your account objects, your contact objects, your opportunity objects, your product object, your order objects, and the likes. So it's not as big as, let's say you're getting all the objects in Salesforce. It is just very simple and narrowed down. You're narrowing down to opportunity, lead, account, contact, products, and maybe price book and the likes. But the bottom line is this. To measure a sales metric, you don't go and start measuring order, count of orders. Count of orders might not necessarily be a sales metric, but maybe you want to count orders based on a specific period or product group. Then perhaps it is a sales metric for you, okay? But for the sake of this learning purpose, we're going to focus mostly on opportunity, leads, accounts, and products, okay? We're not going to go into all those objects that constitute to the Salesforce cloud, okay? Salesforce Sales Cloud, okay? So now, going back to opportunity management, what are your interest area in opportunity management? First, if you have an opportunity, that's fine. Opportunity is like a transaction you want to close. You've already brought in a lead and the lead is qualified. So you created an opportunity for that lead. Fine. However, an opportunity created does not mean anything to the sales. To the bottom line, the opportunity created is just another record in the system. However, if you close that opportunity, then there is a metric, whether it is close won or close lost. A metric is being measured. And that's the interest area for opportunity management. Number of opportunity closed. So you just don't want to measure opportunity, but you want to measure an opportunity whether it is closed or it is closed lost or it is closed won. So remember, opportunities are just records created in the system. However, if you can measure the number of opportunities closed won or closed lost, then you are measuring what Salesforce referred to as a sales metric. In addition to that, you also have what they call sales pipeline. So the sales pipeline is, okay, the number and value of opportunities as they progress through different stages. What do I mean by that? Typically, opportunity goes through a stage, and that's what they call the sales process. The sales process, based on a particular sector or business segment within your organization, as a process. And the process could be, we need to qualify. The sales process could be negotiating, proposing, and the likes. Now, the sales pipeline is a cumulative number of opportunities within a particular stage. How would you know if you're likely to win an opportunity when it is at almost the negotiation stage? Then you know that definitely this is a good opportunity compared to when it is in negotiating stage. Okay? So the sales pipeline is the number of opportunities based on the particular stage. Okay, I know sometimes, that's why I said this is an advanced class. It's not like an ordinary class. If you don't know what I'm talking about right now, then you need to take a step back, try to understand opportunity objects, okay? So the number of opportunities within a particular stage is the sales pipeline. Sales pipeline, how many opportunities am I likely to close in the next couple of days? In addition to that, you also want to relate the sales pipeline with the probability. So if a sales is at a negotiation stage, the probability could be lower compared to reviewing stage, compared to reviewing with stakeholders or finalization of deal, maybe signature required stage. So you need to understand the sales pipeline, and the sales pipeline is just another form of sales metric. In addition to that, we have number of sales activities. Now, you might probably be wondering, what has number of sales activities got to do with selling? If you are having direct relationship with your customer, if you're sending message back and forth, chances are that customer is interested in your products. So the number of sales activities is a number of sales-related activities that help sales representatives in closing a deal. If a customer makes an inquiry about your product today, and the next time you hear from the customer is 1 month time, is 5 months time, chances are the customer is not interested in your product. But if the customer constantly finds out, when is training going to start? How are we going to pay? What are the conditions? Stuff like that is an indicator of a successful or a possible successful opportunities that will close win. So remember, the sales activities, the number of sales activities is a crucial aspect of the sales metrics. Remember, it is not just activities, but the number of sales activities, okay? Going further, we have the forecast, revenue, performance. So this is very generic and stuff, but then again, it's also part of the sales metric. What does that mean? It means that the sales rep performance can determine whether a deal is about to be closed or not. So the number of deals closed by an individual could be something you want to measure. Who is my best agent? How can I reward my best agents? Who are the top representatives I have in my organization? You just don't measure it based on the current sale, but you measure it over a period. So the sales rep performance is an indication of whether a sales is being closed or not. But for you to find out a metric, you have to measure over a certain period. That is how to measure performance. You cannot just say because this guy closed one deal today, then he's a top sales rep. No, this guy closed 10 deals over 2 weeks. Then he's a top performer over someone that closed maybe 5 deals over 2 weeks. But then again, you could also measure number of the amount of deal close the amount in terms of dollars of deal close per number over a period of time. That could be an interesting measure, okay? But then again, you need to start from somewhere. Don't just go and measure things that it becomes really hard for you to quantify, okay? Again, percentage of quota achieved. You set a quota for a sales rep. Is a sales quota achieved for this sales rep? It is something, look at, when it comes to sales metric could come in any form. I'm only giving you an illustration of possible sales metric you can propose as a consultant to a business. But then again, this is just one-off. This is just something I made up and stuff like that through my research. However, you can create your own. What could be an indicator of a sales rep performance for this business? If a sales rep is closing deals. Yes, that could be a performance, but if you're paying the sales rep $1 million every month, and the sales rep is closing just $10,000 or $100,000 every month, it's a good performance because it's closing that much. But then again, I'm paying $1 million. So you could measure the amount of salary paid per the dollar amount this sales rep is bringing to the organization. So don't just measure metrics blindly. You have to measure metric based on the bottom line. What is the bottom line for this sales performance? What is the bottom line for this data metric? That's what you're measuring. How much of value is this data contributing to the business? Okay? Obviously, you guys already know revenue generated. So revenue generated could be $1 million this month, $1 million in September, $1 million in December. That might not be good compared to $1 million every month. So average amount of revenue is much powerful over total amount of revenue in certain situation. For instance, with an average amount of $1 million, total amount of $2 million, average amount of $1 million over 12 months is powerful. Meaning that maybe every month I'm getting $1 million, but if I get total amount of $2 million by December, it's bad because it doesn't reflect or it doesn't show a progression in sales. So you need to understand why you're using average over total. Total is a cumulation of the total revenue, but average is a progression of the total revenue. So in a typical business, let's say a subscription business, you might want to be looking at the churn rate. How many people are coming back? How many people are leaving? You want to measure that. You want to measure the lifetime value of a customer. What is the total value of this customer to my business? Is he resubscribing or going after the first subscription? You need to come up with metrics. Metrics are very interesting. However, as a consultant, your homework, your research should be about coming up with things that you feel the business would need. Coming up with data metrics you feel the business would need for growth, and using the salesforce tools that are there for you, such as reports and dashboard. Okay? So please understand that metrics are not just the data you see. Metrics are collection of data over a period or certain period of time, and not just collect metrics blindly, collect metrics based on business justification for that metric. And obviously we have what they call the campaign return on investment. That's the ROI. How much is this campaign contributing to the sales? Okay, so please know what sales metrics are. Now, let's go to the next one. The next one, Salesforce expect us to know, is the key performance indicators. What are key performance indicators, KPI? KPI is just a measure of value that demonstrates how effective you are achieving the objective of the business. For instance, I want to grow revenue by 20% next quarter. How do you generate revenue that would increase a total revenue of 20% next month or next quarter? You sit down and come up with data points. Number of students that has to register. Number of facilitators that I need to put in place. Number of the total value of a subscription plan. Those are the things that contribute to an overall 20% increase. It's not just about increasing the subscription plan. If you increase the subscription plan by, let's say, another $500, but you bring more facilitators, you bring more support team, you bring more XYZ, you might not necessarily improve or increase revenue by 20%. You could possibly reduce your revenue. So KPIs are the performance indicators you use to measure whether you are getting to your goal, whether you are going to achieve the company's objectives. They are metrics that directly align to the business objective. I want to increase by 20%. That means increase revenue, decrease cost of operation, or increase subscription, increase number of students, decrease marketing budget. Okay? KPI helps you to measure those indicators. What is the current marketing budget? What is the average marketing, average customer acquisition cost? How much does it cost us to acquire a customer? If you do not know that price, you don't know that cost, how would you measure your performance? So those are the things you need to have at the back of your mind. Don't just say, I want to increase this, but what are the elements of the things you're increasing? What is the end goal of those things, and how does it influence what you're trying to measure? So the KPI, once again, are metrics that directly aligned with the business objective. Okay? How do you define KPIs? If you have KPIs, you have to define them based on the things you want. What is your desired outcome? I want to increase revenue by 20% this year. Why does the outcome matter to you? This will become more profitable for the business. How are you going to measure the progress? Increase monthly revenue. These are just suggestions. They are not cast in stone. They're not something that, it is not like a guided process to increasing revenue. It's just something you come up with. More importantly, who is measuring this stuff? When your consulting is so sweet because you are just talking and you're just telling them what they should do. However, there's a template to consulting. There's a template. You don't need to memorize all this. This is a template for you to go use and win a consulting gig. For instance, come up with these questions. They feel like you know what you're talking about. When you're measuring KPI, you need to assign someone that will be responsible for measuring the outcome of the KPI. That's how to define that KPI. How often would you measure this KPI? Would you check on this KPI to see if you are growing this KPI or this KPI is stagnant? So you need someone that would be in charge. You need someone, or you need a timeline when the KPI would be reviewed. You need the outcome. Outcome is what exactly would make this successful. What exactly would make you feel like you have achieved the ultimate goal of measuring the KPI? Then that is where the outcome comes into place. So your achieved outcome is one thing that you want to put your eyes on when you're measuring KPI. Again, this comes with experience. If you haven't worked in the sales and marketing department before, perhaps you should try to get some experience within this field for you to understand the dynamics of sales and marketing activities. Now that you have this KPI definition, how do you measure it? In project management, you know what they call the SMART framework. And this is also applicable to KPI measurements. So what is the SMART framework? Why is it used? The SMART framework is just a way to measure how you are growing. And it's an acronym that stands for specific, measure, attainable, relevant, time frame. Let me explain that. If you have a KPI you want to measure, it's an interesting thing to say you want to increase revenue by 20% next quarter. But the question you want to ask yourself is this attainable? Can we achieve this? You cannot define a KPI that cannot be achieved. No, you can, obviously, because probably you're stupid, but you can define anything if you want to define it. But is it realistic? Can you achieve it? Is it attainable? In addition to that, I told you earlier, for you to define a KPI, it needs to be time-bound. That means you cannot say you're measuring a KPI for 5 years. That's BS. You cannot measure KPI for 5 years. It has to be relatively a smaller period. I want to increase revenue by 20% by the end of this year. Time frame, put a time frame on it. What is the time frame for achieving this goal? That's a SMART framework. Objective, I want to increase KPI, but I want to increase revenue by 20%. Specific, not I want to increase customers. I want to increase students. I want to increase program. No, that's not specific. Specific is I want to increase revenue by 20%. Increasing customers by 20% does not translate in all cases, increase revenue by 20%. If you increase customers by 20% and reduce the subscription price by 50%, then you might be decreasing revenue. So when you are measuring KPIs, you need to have what they call the SMART framework. The SMART framework ensures that the KPI is specific, can be measured towards the end goal. It is attainable, it is achievable, and it is relevant to the organization. You don't want to say, I want to, how would I put it? I want to increase the number of Facebook followers for Black Force. Yes, it's going to look good on our profile. But then again, is it relevant to the business? How has Facebook contributed to the growth of Black Force? Those are the questions you should ask when you are in a consulting gig for sales. You want to use data points that are relevant to the business growth, not just data points, not just any data point, relevant to the business goal. Okay, so this is how you measure KPIs. So what are the typical sales KPI that would possibly indicate or that would lead to a possible success in sales? Lead response time. How often is the lead contacted? And how is the lead replying you? If I send an email to a potential customer and the lead does not reply in 5 months, that's not a good indicator of success. So the response time for a lead is very important. It helps decision maker. Speed up response is one of the factors that influence probability of closing the deals. That means if I reply a customer within 5 minutes, 1 hour, customer feels like, man, these people are very effective. But if you reply a customer 12 hours, 24 hours after the customer send a message, then you know that customers will be getting a feedback. These are feedback that you're not sending. You're sending up. It's called. I cannot remember the word for it right now. But the feedback that it's obvious, is evident, and some feedback you get it from the feeling, what you can observe. If people take you non-serious, if your people take your business without seriousness, then you know that the feedback they're giving you is there. They're telling you that, man, if you're not serious, we're leaving, we're gone. When a customer is upset with you and say, well, next time you will see, that means the customer is not happy. It's not about buying the product, but the customer is giving you a feedback. So the response time is very crucial when you're dealing with customer. In addition to that, the lead conversion percentage. These are good KPIs you want to give to your customers. One of your assignments would be to create these KPIs by just creating a simple dashboard. Okay? Rate of contact is another way is influenced by the factors such as productivity of sales representative. How do you contact this customer? How often are there activities particular to this customer. Those are KPIs that you want to measure, including rate of follow-up. But then again, this is about the sales rep activities with the customers, okay? Let's go further and see opportunities KPIs. Again, I've emphasized this. An opportunity record is just a record in the system. Unless you close one opportunity, it's just another record in the system. So how do you measure KPIs for opportunities? Opportunities created to opportunities closed one. How many opportunities did we create? How many opportunities did we win? The number of opportunities closed by a sales rep may not be similar to the number of opportunities generated. So you want to make sure that the opportunities you're generating is relatively. So how would you measure it? If you have close to one, then you know that you're doing good, right? That means the total number of opportunities you created, let's say 50. The total opportunity one is 50. That means it's one. That means you're doing good. 100% is good. But if you're doing 20%, 10%, you know that you're not doing good, okay? So when it comes to KPIs, from the lead point of view, how often you contact the lead conversion, rate of contact, rate of follow-up. From the opportunity point of view, you want to measure the win of the opportunity. In addition to that, sales targets. These are very good KPIs. Sales targets. I made a target of $1 million. How much do I have in revenue today? If it is 200K and you target $1 million, then you're not meeting your target. But sales target is a good KPI to measure how well you're doing, especially if you measure sales target relative to forecast. Salesforce has an inbuilt forecast tool whereby you can actually forecast revenue based on trending data. However, how would you know if your forecasting is working? Then you use your sales targets to actual sales. Also, you want to measure sales growth. When you talk about sales growth, what is your month-on-month growth? What is your year-on-year growth? What is your quarterly growth? How do you calculate it? Previous months minus current months by the previous month over current month times 100%. You find the percentage of that. That's your sales growth. If BlackForce is declining, do you think we're going to have the next cohort? If people are not showing that they want to do BlackForce training, do you think we're going to have next cohort? No, we're not going to have next cohort. Next cohort is triggered by the number of people that show interest in the training. Next cohort is triggered by the number of people making inquiries. If 5 people are making inquiries, we're not going to have next cohort. But if 100 people are making inquiries, then we could have next cohort. Okay, so sales growth is a KPI that helps you to see the pace at which the organization's sales revenue grows over a certain period of time. Customer value. I said something about lifetime value of a customer. When you use $5 to acquire a customer and you sell a subscription package of $250 for that customer, that's a good conversion, right? That's a good margin. But when you spend $250 to acquire a customer and the customer only spends $250, that's a bad customer value. That's a bad lifetime value of a customer, because if the customer should shun, by shunning, I mean, if the customer should leave the organization, you've literally spent an entire $250 to acquire a customer that only subscribed for $250, but you have serviced that customer with operations, with technology, with other things that you paid for. So you're literally not having a business. So when you're measuring growth, always put that into perspective, that if you acquire a customer, you need to know the margin, the net profit, before you can say you're making money. Okay? Remember, this is about sales. It's about actually getting to that sales business in Salesforce. The tools are just objects and some of the features, and we're going to go into all those tools maybe tomorrow and next week. But you should remember that this is sales, and we want to know how to make sales using the sales metrics we have in Salesforce, or we have generally, not just in Salesforce, but in a business context, okay? So now, we've seen sales metric. We've seen how to measure the sales metric, the KPIs, performance indicators. Now we have what they call the business challenges. What are the business challenges? What exactly are we measuring? Why did we start measuring this? Why are we even collecting this data? What is the trigger point? So the business challenges are just the factors that influence, or the factors that actually triggered us to start measuring these KPIs. The number of students that enrolled last month is smaller, or is less. No, the number of students that enrolled this month is less than the number of students that enrolled last month. How can we increase it? The trigger point is the number of students that enrolled. So if you talk about lead, what are the business challenges you could possibly face with a lead? The data score, the data number of leads that are coming into the system, the quality of the lead. If a lead is coming to the system and you don't have the phone number of a lead, chances are you're going to miss that lead. Why? Because there are limited ways to contact that lead. You don't have the email present. It's a bad data, because the whole purpose of you getting the lead is to reach out to that lead. And the lead does not have an email presented, then chances are the lead cannot be reached out to. Okay? Opportunity. What triggers opportunity challenges? I have opportunities, but I'm not closing to win the opportunities. All opportunities are just open. They are just in this pipeline. That's a challenge. That's a business challenge. So business will now start looking for ways they can solve this business challenge. When it comes to revenue, my forecasts are not matching my actual. That's a business challenge. Why is it that anytime I forecast, I don't actually get the target? That's a challenge you want to solve. So the trigger point is always the reason why you're solving a problem is because there's a trigger to that problem. And it has to do with your business model. It has to do with the current things you're facing in the business. Okay? Now, let's go into possible solutions you can give to those challenges. For instance, we have the low lead data. When it comes to Salesforce, Salesforce gives you that features, that tools. As a consultant, you need to recommend those tools to your clients. If you have low lead data or you have data quality issue, what are the things to recommend? What are the things to recommend for the business? Tell them, I want to implement validation rules. Validation rules will ensure that the data quality coming into the system are clean. If you have low number of leads, then you want to increase your avenues for capturing leads. Maybe you have just one form on the website. You probably want to have 10 forms. Maybe you only advertise on Facebook. You want to go on LinkedIn, you want to go on TikTok, you want to go on Google Ads. Maybe you only send one emails. You want to send more emails, improve your campaign strategies. So Salesforce gives you all those tools, but these are the tools you already know. You know campaign, you know page layout, you know required fields. How do you bring them into solving business challenges? This is your job as a consultant, as a sales consultant. Okay? You want to use your existing knowledge to solve business challenges. Opportunity management. When deals are not closed effectively, when there's when the duration of an opportunity stays longer in a particular stage, how do you solve that duration? How do you solve that problem? Maybe you want to create reminder. In my operation teams, I constantly ask them to build automations around operations such that you don't need to be reminded. It should be triggered based on the process. So you need to have automation tools in place. My mentors, I ask them to send hours, and they send hours that are not completed. We have to build a solution for that. Only completed hours can be submitted. These are business challenges and the solutions you can offer based on business. You need to be able to think as a sales consultant. You can say you know Salesforce. That's fine. But how can you use Salesforce to solve sales problem? That is what Sales Cloud is all about. It's not just about, getting a certification. It's not just about creating objects, products, and the likes. No, it's about how can I use my existing Salesforce knowledge to solve to solve business challenges, and how can I use Salesforce features, inbuilt Salesforce features to solve the business challenges I face as a consultant. That is what Sales Cloud is all about. Revenue performance forecast. How can I accurately forecast a revenue? Automation tools. How can I improve forecasting revenue? Mobile access to data, offline data access. These are things that can help you solve business challenges. We're going to see some of the tools for Sales Cloud, okay? We're going to see some of the tools Salesforce has given us that is part of Sales Cloud services that can be used to solve business challenges in later slides, okay? But to summarize how this come together, when we talk about metric, we talk about KPIs, we talk about business challenges, then we're talking about the strategies. Okay? First, you have a company. After the company, you start creating goals. You start creating strategies. Then, how do you address those strategies? You create objectives. Why do we have goals? We have goals because this is where we want to be. Objectives of those goals are just broken down, are just like the elements of that goal. To have a goal, to get to your goal, you need to have objective, a driver. A driver. A driver is what drives the goals. When you have a mission, when you have a vision, then you have what they call the key values. What are your core values? Your core values should be driving your mission. Your core values should be driving your vision. It should be taking you to where you want to be. You cannot get to a destination if you don't have a path. You cannot just wake up in the morning and get to your end goal in life, not just in business, but in life generally. You need to have a path. And those are the paths. You have KPIs that measures those objectives. And KPIs are just elements of metrics. And what do you do with metrics? You measure them. Okay, so this is like the hierarchy of where you start from. You start from a company, you create goals, you create objectives, and you start measuring those metrics that constitute or contributes towards the KPI, okay? Now, I know we've probably discussed metrics, KPI, business challenges, but there is more to the sales process. The sales process is literally how a customer comes into your business and how you sell a product to the customer, whichever way you see it. If you look at Salesforce sales process, you will see it starts from prospecting, preparation, approach, presentation. Look at anyone can come up with sales process. Anyone can come up with their sales process. At the end of the day, it's about the company. It's about who or how they want to define their sales process. And Blackforce, our sales process could just be subscribe, no, come to the business, join the Telegram, wait for the next cohort, subscribe to a program, attend classes, graduate from the scheme. It's just another sales process. But sales process could just be getting a lead, selling to that lead, and closing that lead. It could just be as simple as 1, 2, 3 process. So they're not cast in stone. They're not like rigid. The first thing first is you want to generate a lead. If you don't have a lead, who are you going to sell to? So lead generation is always a starting point of a sales process. How can you generate a lead? Obviously, through marketing, through advert, through campaign, word of mouth, and the likes. But the lead generation is the first stage of the sales process. Once a lead comes into the system, you want to qualify that lead. How do you qualify the lead? Maybe through engagements. You ask them to join the Telegram. If the lead gets an email and ignore that Telegram request, you might not want to qualify that lead, right? Because the lead doesn't show interest. But then again, you cannot make that assumption that all leads have Telegrams. Then the next side of this qualification could just be campaign. Interact with that lead. If the lead should reply your email, then you probably want to qualify that lead. And that's where the lead scoring process comes into place. The rate of contact, rate of follow-up. Those are scoring process. The good thing is Salesforce has what they call Einstein that helps you using AI to score a lead. But we're going to get there shortly, okay? But right now, know that every lead has a scoring process. And the lead qualification has to do with the interaction you have with the lead. The next state is the contact. Is the conversion, sorry. The conversion of a lead determines whether you have a business, you have a potential customer you can sell to. Remember, all leads generally are prospects. Anyone that signed up on the Blackforce website today, they're just prospects. Unless they have been part of the training program. If they have not been part of the training program, they are prospects awaiting conversion. How do you convert a lead? You convert a lead when you have moved the needle. When you're doing sales, it's all about moving the needle. Moving the needle is about strategies you put into place to ensure that this sales is likely to close. What are the strategies? For instance, at Blackforce, we could just send an email to say, we have seen your email, or we have seen you fill a form. Please join this Telegram link. These are strategies you put into place. If the lead clicks on that Telegram link, possibly we could say this lead has converted, but that's not what we do at Blackforce. Until you subscribe, that's when we know that you have been converted. But in reality, it shouldn't be until a lead subscribe or buy stuff from you. No, that's not the definition of conversion. Conversion is when you've seen an opportunity to sell to this lead. Okay? When you have seen an opportunity, you cannot sell to a lead that, how can you sell Salesforce to a primary or secondary school student? No matter how lucrative Salesforce is, if a secondary school student comes to Blackforce and sign up, you shouldn't be qualifying that lead. That's why on Blackforce, we ask you for your qualification, for your years of experience, your background. Like these are scoring data points you can use to qualify a lead. If a lead does not have education, does not have any experience, how would you sell Salesforce to that lead? Salesforce might be easy to enter, but you still need to have common sense. You still need to have education. You still need to have some secondary school qualifications and the likes. So conversion does not mean that the lead has subscribed. Conversion, according to Salesforce, is I can now sell to this lead because this lead has what it takes to buy my products. Then that takes us to opportunity. Selling to the lead, close won, close loss, depending on the customer decision. Okay, so you start from lead generation, lead qualification, lead conversion, then the opportunity process kicks in. Okay, opportunity process is the last phase of the sales process, not until they finish their training. Some people might not finish their training. Does that mean you wouldn't close that lead? No, you will close the sales process. However, since they've subscribed, they've paid, you've literally won the sales process. What happens after is just cosmetics. It's just maintaining the products or the services you have promised the lead. Okay? Now, sales methods. This is a bit vague for some people that don't know sales stuff like that. And some of the concepts are just Salesforce stuff and general sales things. But ultimately, sales methods are just ways which you want to sell to the lead. For instance, target account selling. What does that mean? It means that I have an organization, okay? And I want to sell, let's say I want to sell single login for an organization, like a school, let's say St. Lawrence College in Kingston, right? I know that single login is very useful and it can sell because we're using single login to manage our identity of the student that registered through Blackforce. However, you cannot just go to St. Lawrence College principal and say, come and buy single login, because single login is very good. You can use profile, you can use role, you can use department to identify a student. That's good, but target account selling could just be as simple as reaching out to a professor and selling the quiz app to the professor. Telling the professor that, you can test your students using a time-based quiz app provided by single login. All you need to do is ask them to register and you create your timely or quarterly test for your student. That is what they call target account selling. You've broken down who you can sell to. You now reach out to them independently. Eventually, your goal is to sell to the organization as a whole, but you don't want to penetrate the organization as a whole. You want to go through targeted people. Then you now create an account for a professor. You create an account for another professor. By the time 10 professors in St. Lawrence College are using your single login, you can now pitch to the director of operations and say, look at 10 professors are currently using my single login tool. Is this something you're interested in? Then they can say, okay, we want to buy. So that's target account selling. Value selling. Value selling is when you provide a justification to use your tool. What is the justification for Salesforce? Salesforce helps you to improve your customer relationship management. Or not just that. Salesforce could just be, whenever people sign up on your website, we do not get an email. With Salesforce, you can always get an email guaranteed in the inbox. That is value selling. What are you solving for this business? You are selling the value Salesforce provides. Okay, so value selling is different from target selling. Target selling is when you strategically break down the people to reach out to sell. But value selling is like you actually tell them that, man, if you don't get this stuff, you're missing out on a lot of things. You're missing out on a growth opportunity. You're missing out on this. That is telling the business that blindly, this stuff will give you value. We add value to your business, okay? And it's what they call solution selling. Solution selling is you go to a business and you saw a problem, then you provide a solution to that problem. That's just solution selling. You find out what they're facing. Some of them sometimes usually build a custom solution for that business. But then again, solution selling is just providing solution for the business. Okay? And there's what they call the spin and the snap selling. That one is more advanced stuff, but the spin focused on situation, the problem, implication, and payoff. So spin is a strategic approach to selling. Okay, it's in 4 components. It focuses on, okay, you have a situation, you have a problem, you have the implication of the problem, maybe the cost of not cost. The implication could just be customers not happy or whatever it is. Then the payoff, how long would it take to recoup your investments? Okay, and then snap selling that focus on just speed. I want to make sure that I can sell this stuff tomorrow. So I'll just say snap selling. An example of a snap selling is that typically we sell license for 500 per user, but because you're lucky today, we're selling it for 250, 50%. If you cannot buy it today, tomorrow is going to come back to 500. So snap selling is when you see an opportunity and you leverage on that opportunity and you sell immediately. Otherwise, you will not be able to sell again for that client. Okay, so there's so many selling strategies. There's so many things you can implement, but then again, understand the methods and use methods to determine what selling you want to implement. But then again, this is not really consulting. This is more like you working as a salesperson. Okay, so expectations from this training is that you have an experience working as a salesperson, so it makes sense to you. Okay, now implementation strategies. I'm going to put a pause here for a minute. We spent about an hour talking about sales KPIs, process, and the likes. So I would like to find out if you guys have any questions regarding everything I've said so far. Remember, sales metrics, the KPIs, business challenges, and the process which you can sell. So please, if you have any questions regarding what we've talked about so far, please raise your hand so I can quickly address them before we move on to implementation strategies. We have a long night to go. We're still going to cover sample certification exams based on what we've learned tonight, because my strategy for this Sales Cloud is, as you're learning, you're seeing sample certification exam, and you can, after the training, you can go write your certification exam immediately, okay? So if you have any questions regarding what we've learned so far, please, can you indicate by raising your hand? Then I'll call you according to how your hands are being raised. Can Francis unmute yourself and speak, please?
Thank you, Mr. Babatope. So my question is, based on your experience as a consultant, which of the metrics should you suggest for the business to be used based on the metrics, sales metrics you earlier mentioned?
That's a good question, okay? And to be honest with you, you don't have metrics cast in stone. You don't have specific metrics you want to suggest. The business will drive the metric. Look at, you have to think critically. Like some of the things I'm teaching you, I've probably not suggested it for the business I've worked with before. I've only just said, okay, just a simple report, but the business would drive that questions. For instance, subscription. What are the metrics you want to suggest for subscription? You want to check churn rates. Churn rates are very important when it comes to subscription, because you cannot predict subscription for a year unless it's a yearly subscription. You cannot predict it for the next year. Chances are those that subscribe today might not have a reason to subscribe tomorrow. So the churn rate at which people leave a subscription is crucial. Okay? Again, it comes with experience. If you work as a business analyst, data analyst, you will understand this. But then again, the business model will drive the KPIs you want to suggest. It's not usually stated anywhere. I can look at data and I can tell you that these are the kind of metrics you should be looking at. But what if the business is not even collecting the data metric? Then your whatever KPIs is suggested is just pointless, right? So always ask business, what do you currently have? What is your goal? Then strategically think through and provide a KPI for that business. Okay? Do you have a follow-up question to that?
Yeah. So based on all these metrics we have, when you're looking at like sales rep performance, when you're looking at a business, are you judging it based on individual sales reps or overall business performance?
Or individual. When it comes to sales rep, it's about individual. You want to see how, like it's called, can you see individual sales rep? You want to see how much the individual sales rep is contributing to the overall sales performance, but you want to see it from an individual point of view. Okay?
Yeah, so when this sales rep, like we are looking at one sales rep, he's doing good for the month, but the amount of revenue he's bringing, the other sales rep, for example, in Canada, is bringing more, like average revenue he's generating is more, but this one is giving us more sales in a month. So whom can we rate high?
You want to look at the business objective. Why are you even measuring sales rep performance? Is there an incentive for sales rep? You know, like sales rep at the end of the day, the overall team, sales team, wants the business to sell more. So it doesn't matter if this sales rep is performing more than this sales rep. To the business, it could possibly mean nothing if there is no objective or there is no incentive for sales rep performance. So sales rep performance could just be any another metric you're measuring. However, if there is a objective, smart targets, there's a reason why you're measuring that. Then you can now say, let's improve the salary of the sales rep, let's fire the sales rep and the like. So always, whatever you're measuring, always relate it to a business objective. Okay?
Okay, because what I was asking is based on maybe if I'm looking at the dashboard, I'm seeing this to know where maybe the business will put more efforts to improve. That was the reason I was asking that.
Oh yeah, that's fine. But again, it's sales rep, right? Sales rep is really nothing. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
No worries. Matilda, unmute yourself and speak, please.
Oh, hi, Babatope. I have two questions actually. When you talk about lead conversion, you said the lead can be converted to create accounts and contacts. You also said the opportunity process is triggered after conversion. What triggers at what point is the opportunity created? Is it that the lead is converted to an opportunity? Like what triggers that opportunity creation process?
When the lead is converted, you get accounts and contacts, and you can also create an opportunity.
Automatically.
Yes.
Okay. My second question, I'm trying to understand when you use these terminologies: deal, lead, and opportunity. Yeah, I know what opportunity is, but deal, is it that deal is like an object?
I don't get that. What do you mean?
Yeah, so if you say the number of sales-related activities that help representatives in closing deals over a certain period, how am I linking these deals to leads?
So again, come again for that. Repeat that statement.
Okay. I've seen a situation where deal was used as an object to kind of manage leads. So it got confusing at some point. So I'm just trying to, is deal a separate object? Because I'm familiar with lead, I'm familiar with opportunity.
Deal is just an opportunity record. Deal, like you have a deal you want to close. Yeah. It's an opportunity. So it's not like another object. Deal is just an opportunity.
Oh, it's an opportunity. Oh, that's good. Thank you.
No worries. Please, can you give me like 2 minutes? I just want to do something. 2 minutes, please. Thanks. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Yeah, so deal is just an opportunity, okay? So there's nothing like a deal unless obviously the business has a different way to sell, okay? So deals are just opportunities. So let's continue. Now we are entering implementation strategies. Okay? It's a bit different from sales practices. Okay? Again, implementation strategies are something you've already done before. So for most of you guys, it's going to be a refresher. However, it's still very important, and it is part of your Sales Cloud certification. So implementation strategies. Some of you guys are working on a work experience project. When you're working on a work experience project, they've given you requirements, or maybe you're just in a meeting talking about how to achieve a goal. The first thing phases of consulting projects is your planning. You cannot complete a project that is not well planned. Some of you will start with a very good foundation. I want to complete this project. I think these requirements are clear. I'm ready to go. But you get into the project and it becomes so messy. Your entire project plan becomes we're figuring it out, which is not a good thing. Okay? So if you're given a project, if you're a consultant, the first thing you need to do is to plan. How do you plan? You know the inputs, you know the outputs, and you know the processes in between. How do you get to point A to point B is about planning. So the first thing you need to do when you get your consulting gig is to write out a plan, how to achieve the end result of the project. The next thing is to analyze the requirements. This is the most boring aspect of a project. Analyzing requirements is very important. It's very important because this is where you try to know what is in scope and what is out of scope. I want to create a website where customer can interact. You could use a community website, or you can develop from scratch. Develop from scratch could cost you more resources. Community website would cost you less resources and it's out of the box in Salesforce. Analyze your requirements and create a design. You have to create a solution design. Solution design is when you have analyzed the requirement. Don't go and create a design that you have. So that means you cannot do design before analysis. Some of you, when I gave you the project, the first thing you went to is go to your org and start creating fields. No, that's not the right approach. In fact, build is almost like once you've done 50% of the milestones in a project, that's when you start building. Building should be very easy if the design is perfect. But then again, you need to design. And you need to have your design approved before you start building, because you could revert everything you've designed or everything you've built back to the design phase. So always understand the phases of consultation. It can take 2 weeks to finish a project. It can take 3 months to finish a project, depending on how you approach a project. So let's go into details of these phases. Planning. When you're planning a project, one of the things you want to identify is the reason for that project. If I ask you to create a lead application management, why are we creating that lead app? If you do not know the reason for a project, whatever you're planning is just waste of your time or waste of the business time. You could even propose a better project. You could propose a better strategy or a new project entirely once you get the reason. The reason is important, is just as important as the end of the project. So first, you want to identify the reason. The next is the scope. What is included and what is out of scope? Do I need to write a program? Do I need to touch code? Or I just need to do configuration? Do I need declarative or programmatic? Do I need app exchange or higher resources? What is in the scope? Budgets, those are the kind of things you want to make plans for because it will determine the success of the projects. Communication. Communication is how do you intend to communicate with the stakeholders? Who are your stakeholders? Your stakeholders are the product owner, the directors, the CEOs, those that approve the paycheck, the HR. The project manager could also be part of the stakeholders. Those that approve the budgets, those that approve the resources, those that approve the design. The architect is also a stakeholder. Even the BAs sometimes are stakeholders, even though they are writing the requirement, they're still stakeholders because when you're planning, you have to make sure that you know who is who. When you have an update, you put the key stakeholder in the to address bar and you copy all relevant people in the training email just for awareness. It has nothing else but an awareness. And it is very important you copy them in your communication. But who communicates? How often should you communicate? Every week, every milestone, every end of the month? How consistent? You need to be consistent with communication. The style of communication. Do you want to attach a file or you want, whenever they open the email, they should see all the project updates? These are planning. If you don't plan it, they'll tell you that, when did you implement this stuff? I was not aware. I did not approve this. I know this is not project management class, but you need to know this as a consultant. These are the bread and butter of being a consultant. Consultant is not just about knowing Salesforce. No, consultant is what soft skills you have. Plus, by consultant, I mean Salesforce consultant is the soft skills you have plus the Salesforce skills. That's it. You don't need to know everything, but you need to have those soft skills, communication skills, technical skills, Salesforce skills that complement those things you already have. Then identify the people. I keep telling you, the people, know your stakeholders, know who are going to be using the application you're building. If the people you're building an application for cannot use it, it's pointless. User experience, user interface. Do you want to put a green, look at, if you go to Blackforce website, the user experience is about how can I sign in? Can you see the user experience of signing? It is orange compared to other links. That means other links are not as crucial as the sign-in button. That's the user experience, user interface design. Most people want to navigate through a program, and you see some programs on the website, it's very cluttered. But with Blackforce, you can just go straight and read through about a particular program. That's the user experience for that program or for that project, okay? Change and training plan. What is change? Change is when you have already made a plan. How do you make changes to that plan? What is the change management process for that organization? If you build a project, if you build an application to improve operations, but no one in the operation team, they don't know how to use the application, it is as useless as you not having any application in place. So you need to train the user. What are the strategies for training the user? It's all part of the planning phase. Know it. You don't have to deliver it at that planning phase, but you need to know it. Know what is included in the planning phase. And more importantly, identify the timeline, the project risk. If I start this project today and one of my resources said they are resigning from work, would this project still take place? Would I still deliver on this project? The risk associated to the project is just as important as the project. When it comes to project risk, you can mitigate risk, you can accept risk, you can transfer risk. There's so many strategies in PM. But then again, use some of the skills you have to implement a good project plan such that anytime you start a project kickoff, you know that maybe 1 or 2 days lagging or contingency plan in place, you will accomplish or you will finish the project. But if you don't plan properly, then know that the project is likely not to be successful. Okay? So identify those things and the current system and what you're changing. Okay? They need to buy into whatever you are selling to them. Now, analyze your projects. You've already planned the project, which is fine. Planning is when almost everyone is involved. Analysis is about those that know what's up, those that know the details. Okay, so you in the planning stage, you have even possible. Sometimes you have the CEO. Yes, I've been in a planning phase of a project before whereby the CEO was the main contributor because the CEO is the one paying. So he wants to make sure that look at, I'm paying you, so you have to include it. That's fine. But analysis is within your team. Not everyone should be involved in analysis. It's only people that are making the contribution in terms of the technical contribution or knowing the in and out of a process. If you have to improve an operation department, you don't need to bring the CEO to that operation meeting. No, you just need to bring the people working in operation to come and discuss the input and output of the operations department. So the planning, yes, the CEO can be part of it, but analysis, no. It's only the people involved, the subject matter experts, the people that contribute directly to the project. Those are the people that would engage with the analysis. We want to identify the gaps between the requirement and the project scope. Are we going to be achieving this project? Is it within the scope? But more importantly, you want to sign off on the requirements. A lot of people write requirements and you start executing without even signing off this requirement. You know, the first sprint you had during your work experience is pretty much a sign-off meeting, even though, you know, I did not put it in paper or in email and stuff like that. You need to get the stakeholders, the key product owner to say, I have approved these stories. I have approved these requirements. You can now start working on your project. If you don't get that email confirmation, you are on your own. Analysis requires you to sign off. Look at every phase of the project requires you to sign off, not just the analysis, even the planning. You have to sign off on your planning. So everyone puts their signature on the project documents. Never start a project without signing off the projects. Okay? Because sign off on the requirements means that nothing is going to change this requirement. And if anything is going to change this requirement, you have to implement what they call a change management process. You cannot just bring new requirements when a project is going on. It's going to disrupt the timeline of the project. Okay? And obviously, you want to avoid scope creep. You don't want to keep adding to the scope of the project until now you cannot even achieve a very simple scope within the project. So avoid scope creep at all costs. The next is design. Transform the requirement into solutions. I want to transmit student data from Blackforce website into Salesforce. How do I transmit data into Salesforce? I need to create a student object. That's the design. The student object needs to be related to the contact, to the account. That's a design. I want to send an automatic email whenever a student record is being created in the Salesforce platform. How do you send an automatic email? Using a flow builder. That's the design. You don't have to go and create that flow. No. Creating that flow is in build. Design is how do you want to do it? That's what they call a solution designer. Some of you, maybe you can even apply for solution design. You don't have to apply for consultant. There's so many job roles you can apply for. You just need to know your passion. Your passion will now determine the kind of roles you can apply for, because a designer does not necessarily mean someone that goes into the salesforce to create those objects. They're just someone that knows that you need to create an object. Solution design. Solution design is about how you plan to implement this project, this solution, this project. You want to create a prototype. You don't have to design it. If you want to, go to the hands-on org, spin up a playground, and even just mock up the schema. It is not cast in stone. It is not like completed sign-off. It's just showing the people how to do it. Use this tool called Draw. There's so many other tools you can use, but Draw is where you design your solution. Okay? Draw is where you can design. I cannot teach you all this stuff. You just need to find out tools. Some people subscribe to Lucid Art. Okay, Lucid Art, I think. Lucid Chart, sorry. Lucid Chart, you can use Lucid Chart to design your solution. It's about visualizing that process, visualizing that object and how they connect together. You can even use flow icon that says send email, then you now draw a flow icon that the flow is what is sending that email. It's all about design, creating a prototype. Okay? Then after that, you want to build. Build is obviously the practical side of things. Build is when they actually see that, man, the project is coming to life. But a lot has happened before build. A lot has happened before build. About 60% of the projects has been completed before build. Maybe 50, but you know that once you have a design approved, the project is pretty much simple. It's pretty much done. It's just a case of building. So what is building? Building is getting hands-on, version reviews, data migration, and all those kind of stuff. That's all parts of building, okay? And the next thing is you want to validate. Some of you guys will be deploying to different hogs. When you move your change sets from your hog to the dev org, the first thing you want to do is validate, not deploy. Remember, guys, you validate that component, that change set. You want to make sure that it is working fine. Then you deploy that, but within that hog. You don't deploy to production. You deploy within the hog, then you test. You test in different environments. That is still part of validation. User acceptance, regression testing, performance testing, penetration testing. There are all ways to validate what you have built. User acceptance testing is when you give your product, your project, like the final solution, to the business, those that will test, that will use your product. They are the user acceptance testing people. Regression performance testing is to see if your product can stand a big load. When we first designed single login, we were testing with 10 users and things were going fine. But when people started signing up for single login, we have about 2,000 users and things were slow. If you were part of cohort 1 or cohort 2, you observed that single login was really slow. But again, improvements, validation, regression testing, load testing, then cohort 3, single login became faster. That's because sometimes when you're building a product, you don't think about the user. Can you scale up to 1 million users without breaking this code, without breaking this application? That is testing, performance testing. Performance testing is carried out when you integrate with data. You want to increase the load on this application and see how it's going to perform under a very stressful situation, okay? Now, you want to deploy. Deploy is when you move your changes to production. Deploy is when you go live. It's not the end of the project. It is what happens when you go live. Then after that, you do some user training, beta testing. These are part of the process. But ultimately, you hand over documentation to business. You need to hand over documentation to business once you're done. You are done, give the business what they need, and you sign off. That's it. But make sure that users can use your application. What is the point of deploying an application to production that no one is using? What you recommend after completion of an engagement is to give the business ways to measure adoption of that application. That is not your responsibility as a consultant. Measuring adoption is not your responsibility as a consultant, it's a business responsibility, but you are to sign off and hand over documentation of that project, okay? So what are the possible challenges you can have when you're running or managing a project? Incomplete, unclear requirements, delayed in meetings, project manager, team managers, ineffective communications, project timeline, resource availability. Look at right now in your work experience, you guys are going through possible challenges. Some of you messaged me earlier saying, my component is not validated. I think we have to create this manually in the hub. Those are possible challenges. Understanding your colleagues, when to deploy, how to coordinate deployment. Those are possible challenges. You guys are experiencing what they call the real world problem. Okay, so if you're being paid 10 grand a month as a consultant and you cannot deploy the change component, are you going to go to your manager to find out if the manager can help you deploy it, or you're going to spend some time on Google to find out why you cannot deploy this? Then if you found out that, man, this is beyond my capacity, this is beyond me, then you go to your tech lead. You go to the tech manager. You escalate until you now strike off that requirement. Obviously, you don't want to strike off the entire project. You only want to strike off the requirement that could not be fulfilled. That's after you've tried everything. But don't go straight to the product owner and say, I don't think this requirement can be fulfilled. Because definitely, if it has been analyzed, if it has been planned, if it has been designed, then it should be fulfilled. Because part of the analysis is to find out the feasibility of the development. Okay? You cannot say you want to develop something Salesforce has not provided us the opportunity to develop, right? So that's the feasibility study. Okay? Now, again, implementation methods. You've seen this over and over again, but then again, there are two types, majorly two types, the waterfall and the agile. The agile, the one that has to do with user stories development. That's the agile. Waterfall, you want everything to be ready before you kick off. Like literally, you want to dot your I's and cross your T's. You want to make sure that everything is ready, the number of resources. In agile, you can hire resources in between projects. As long as you have the resources to execute the first user story, you're good. In waterfall, you want to hire all the resources immediately. So different strategies for implementing projects. Always choose the one that is applicable to the project you are managing. Not everything is agile, even though they are preaching agile, but not everything is agile. Waterfall could just be as good as executing a simple project. As long as waterfall could be 3 months, waterfall could be 2 weeks, fine. But agile means dynamic. Agile means responsive. Agile means I am adapting to the changes. I am adapting to the changes that is happening. Incremental, iterative approach. I am finding out new problems and how to address that problem. Does not mean I'm changing the scope. Does not mean I'm altering the requirement. It means that I am just being flexible compared to waterfall. Waterfall is like, man, until I know what I'm doing. I'm not going to move. I'm not going to change until I'm done. If I cannot do it, that's the end of the project. Okay. So understand the differences between the waterfall and the agile methodology. Okay. Again, you guys already know licensing, but let's go into licensing again. We have the Salesforce Essentials, we have the Lightning Professionals, we have the Lightning Enterprise, and we have the Unlimited. Whatever you want to do, make sure that the business has the license for it. Well, some of the work experience, I keep using that because this is what is currently happening. They wanted to create something, but they said there is no knowledge license. Licenses is important. So if you have done your analysis, you shouldn't figure out licensing after 3 weeks. Your analysis should include, does this business have the license for the requirements they've given to us? That's analysis. So your business analyst needs to have figured that out before it gets to 3 weeks. Don't tell me after 3 weeks, we do not have knowledge article, so we cannot implement these user stories. That is a problem from your side. Understand business analysis requirements. This is what Abiola has taught you guys. This is what I've emphasized over and over again. Business analysis does not mean that, I can talk, I can do this, I can write user stories. It's about critical thinking. It's also about critical thinking. In addition to being able to present, being able to talk, you have to think, what am I missing? What could possibly go wrong? Have I analyzed this situation? That is what business analysis is. You want to create an application. Do you have what it takes to create that application? That's what business analysis is. So if you're coming up in the 3rd week saying there is not enough license to execute this user story, then you haven't done your job properly. This is work experience. But in the marketplace, it could be anything. It could lead to being fired from your job because you haven't done your job properly. So you have different licenses, the platform license, the user license, which is Salesforce license. Every user needs to have Salesforce. Any user that wants to access the Salesforce platform needs a Salesforce license. And there's what they call the permission set license. Where we're going to get to Einstein Analytics, you'll see how permission set license is very important. Feature license. Feature license are licenses that is just a feature. You don't need to have it. Marketing Cloud is just a feature. Flow user is just a feature. Flow is a feature to your Salesforce org. You don't need to have it, but you can enable it for certain sets of people. Okay? That's what Flow user is. Then know that you need a Sales Cloud license. Until you start working in Salesforce and they ask you to become an architect, that's when you know that this is more important than actually doing the job. Sales Cloud license is required for Sales Cloud features. Okay, so the Sales Cloud license gives you opportunity, contact, and all those stuff, but it is required for the Sales Cloud license. Okay. In addition to that, we have the community, and we have the customer community plus, partner community, and the likes. What is the difference between customer community and customer community plus? The types of things you can do, knowledge articles, and the likes. Partner is when you want to engage with partner. You want them to be able to sell some of your services. So always look out for the things that is required for the feature or for the project you're working on. Don't make an assumption. Don't think there's an architect that has done that job. Do your analysis and make sure that the licenses available can be used to work on the projects. Now, particularly to Sales Cloud, you have what they call the high velocity sales, which is an extra feature license you can have, like a permission set license. You have the Salesforce inbox that helps you to integrate the Gmail and the Outlook. You can also manage your calendar and the availabilities using the Salesforce inbox. You also have what they call the sales map. Salesforce maps. You have the Salesforce Cloud iStern. You have the Salesforce Lightning Console. Let's just go into some brief, understanding of these features and products. High velocity sales. You probably hear about CPQ and all this kind of stuff. High velocity sales is when you have a very busy environment. You want to engage with user. You want productivity features. You want work queues. You want lead scoring features. How can I identify a lead and score that lead immediately? You want to identify different touch points. Like that's the sales cadences. You want to identify different touch points that you can use to reach out to a customer. You want a process. And if you want to manage different sales process, this all comes under high velocity sales. High velocity sales in the sense that you have some of the features of Service Cloud, core productivity, sales agent, and the likes in this high velocity sales, okay? In iStern Activity Capture, it's just another productivity tool that helps you to merge your emails, your calendar with Salesforce. Okay, so if you want to merge and capture data such as emails, events, contacts, you can use iStern Activity Capture. Okay, in addition to that, you need at least, I think, 12 months worth of data in able to use iStern, because iStern is an AI. Okay, AI meaning that it utilizes AI to provide predictions, recommendations. So you cannot use AI if you don't have data that can be used to predict. So at least 12 months worth of data needs to be present. In addition to that, we have what they call the iStern Lead Opportunity Scoring, iStern Account Opportunity Insight, iStern Forecasting, Tableau CRM, and the like. They are all iStern products. There's even a certification for Salesforce based on iStern, okay? But for your Sales Cloud, you just need to know that these products exist under the Sales Cloud, extra licenses you can get. In addition to that, I've already mentioned Salesforce Inbox. One of the key things about Salesforce Inbox is ability to insert availability and scheduling. So you can actually insert your availability in Salesforce because of the synchronization of a Salesforce inbox and your Gmail, your Outlook. Okay? Remember, these are extra licenses you need to buy. There's also what they call the Salesforce map. It's just an intelligence tool. So if you're working within the field service, something like Salesforce map might be very useful. It helps with the routing planning, the business rules, schedules, and the likes, okay? So Salesforce map is just another data visualization that helps you, sell faster. You can know which customers, where customers are living, and route your sales agent based on the live tracking data provided by the customer, okay? Lastly, I think we have deployment strategy. The tools for deployment include the change set, which some of you are currently using. There's what they call the Ant migration tool. That's a code-based deployment. There's Visual Studio Code that can be used as well. Okay, developers currently know about this. And obviously, you have Data Loader and Data Import Wizard and third-party tools. Let's say you want to import, I think 5 million, you have a limit for Data Loader. What about 10 million records? You need a third-party tool because you cannot do that with Data Loader. You need to go to the App Exchange and find out tools from a third party that can help you import data. And when you want to deploy to production, first of all, you need to communicate. Tell people you're about to release to production. In addition to that, you need to lock out the user. When you're deploying to production, you don't want anyone to log in. So you can just lock out the users. I think there's a feature in Salesforce that can help you to lock out all the users and stop them from logging in. Again, you want to turn off email deliverability. So when you do some transaction, you don't want the system to send out an email. You want to put some maintenance. When you log into Salesforce, sometimes you get maintenance window. You want to put something like that, but you want to tell the business that there is a maintenance going on at XYZ time. In addition to that, post-deployment, again, communicate. Communication it's in fact one of the key skills required to become a consultant. Communication, whether through email, verbally, non-verbal, you need to communicate what is going on. Then you need to train, prepare end user, beta review testing. Don't go and develop an amazing application that no one can use. So while you're developing that training, when you release the version 1, train, beta training. Beta training is when you've released version 1, but you know that it's not perfect. But yet, you are training them on how to use it. So when you release a complete package, they already got familiar into how to use the application and becomes easier to adopt or start using the application, okay? And I think when it comes to deployment, okay, let's say you have data. These are very important stuff I'm telling you guys because you will face this in the workforce. You have data that needs to come into Salesforce. How should you go about deploying those data? The first thing you start with is the users. Every record in Salesforce belongs to a record owner. So if you do not have the users present in Salesforce, how would you associate an account record to the user? Who owns that account record? So the users is the first thing you deploy when you're moving from one org to the other or from a legacy application to Salesforce. The next thing is the accounts. Accounts are related to contacts, but without an account, you can have contact without an account, but that contact will be private. But account is the next thing for you to deploy. Then you go to contacts. Then you go to opportunities. You go to products, product line items. As you can see, leads are just here, meaning that leads are not really, even in Salesforce, leads is not really connected to any objects. Until you convert a lead, it's not really associated to all these objects. Then you have the campaign, because obviously without leads or contacts, you cannot have campaign. Then you have the campaign members, which is just leads and contacts. Then you have the contracts. Assets is the last thing you should deploy. Okay? So remember, the first thing is users, accounts, contacts, opportunities, and you go down, deployments, objects, deployments. Okay? Now that you've done all those fancy stuff, you've signed up the projects, everything looks good. What is the next thing you would recommend for that business? The next thing you recommend for that business is to measure. Measure your implementation. Find out how successful your project has been. What is the point of creating an amazing application that no one is using? You want to measure adoption. Adoption is, are people using my application? Lead quality. What is the quality of the score? What is the conversion ratio? Revenue generation, stage duration. How long are the opportunity staying in a stage? Are we progressing in our sales pipeline? That is implementation success. Sales productivity. How much of influence is activities contributing to the close won opportunities? Forecast categories. Forecast accuracy. How much did I say I'm going to make compared to how much I'm actually making? What is the forecast? What is the actual? Campaign effectiveness. How many campaign messages did I send out? How many leads came as a result of that campaign? What is the return on investment? How much did I spend on a campaign? And how much did I make from that campaign? User adoptions. I've created Salesforce, I bought license. Are they using the Salesforce platform? Is there logging in going on? How many times are they logging in a day? What applications are they using? Are they using the application I designed, or they're just using the generic Salesforce application? From a business point of view, I spent $10,000 on Salesforce. Is Salesforce giving me $10,000 worth of value? What is the return on investment? How much revenue am I generating? The whole goal of sales is customer and money. If you cannot bring customer, you got to bring money. If you cannot bring money, you have to bring at least one thing. So number of customers, and what is the lifetime value of that customer? Am I paying $250 for customer acquisition? And how much is that customer subscribing, or what products are they subscribing to? You want to measure your implementation success. Have I successfully implemented this? Is this something I'm proud of? After you finish your engagement, you sign up the documentation, but you want to encourage business to measure the implementation success. Okay, I think that's all for today. And we have the quiz app session, which is pretty much your certification prep. Although we're still going to have maybe 1 day of certification prep or 2 days, that's fine. But remember, what we're going to be doing in quiz app is pretty much your certification prep. So I'm going to stop here again to find out if you guys have any questions based on what you've learned so far. And if you have any areas I should explain, and the next 10 minutes, we just go through the certifications before we end the class for today. So raise your hand if you have any questions so I can quickly address them before we go into quiz and certification prep. Do you guys have any questions? And you can raise your hand so I can call you according to how your hands are being raised. Okay? Nonso, please unmute yourself and speak.
Hi, Babatope. Good evening, everyone. Really nice to be back in class while on the field at the same time. I'm quite excited. I have a quick question regarding scope creep. Really basic concept, but quite important when gathering requirements. Now, the question is on out of scope items. Now, I want to know if you particularly, based on your experience, have any kind of like strategy, or let me use the word technique, when you're trying to spell out of scope items. You know, when gathering requirements, sometimes out of scope items are clearly stated. It might be as a result of things that the client did not request for. But sometimes you have to just basically, you know, do analysis and just identify these things and know that, okay, they are just not part of the scope. And sometimes you just feel like you're just pulling those things out of a hat. You know, this is an experience I've had. So I just wanted to know if, even if anyone else here has that kind of experience, you know, or challenge while, you know, identifying out of scope items.
Okay, that's a good question. That's a good question. And to be honest with you, it all comes with experience, okay? I work as a consultant, and trust me, when I consult, they like me. The reason why they like me is I make them happy. You look for cost-benefit analysis of the things that you consider out of scope. Out of scope could be creating a report and dashboard. But then again, how long would it take you to create a simple report and dashboard that will make you feel good? Maybe 1 hour or probably 3 hours of your time. It's out of scope, but it's something you can provide as value added. So in terms of out of scope, my recommendation is number of hours you're going to be spending on those items. It's okay to state it clearly that we are not responsible for connecting the APIs to get data. However, data will come into Salesforce from anywhere. Out of scope is how would data come into Salesforce? In scope is we use data in lead objects to create a lead preference management. Out of scope is how would the data come into Salesforce? As you can see, you have made a very clear statement saying that we are going to assume that a lead data would enter into Salesforce. You don't care how that data comes in. In most cases, another resource will be responsible for connecting the API to get data into the lead objects. Then your own task should be creating a lead preference from the lead object, from the lead data. Out of scope for you will be how the data comes in, but you will assume that data comes into the lead object, okay? So remember, out of scope is very subjective. It has to be the way you feel. Do I feel like I can do this stuff in 2 hours, 3 hours without any issue? If yes, then just do it. If no, just say, this is out of my scope. I'm not responsible for getting data into Salesforce. I'm going to use the data that comes into Salesforce. However, for you to test your application, you need to create those data yourself, okay? So that's my own way of doing things. I look at what is it costing me and what is the benefit of it. If it's a small cost, but I benefit, I'm going to do it myself regardless. But it's always good to actually state it in your requirement document so they don't make an assumption that you'll be responsible for doing it, okay? Let's go to the next person, and that's Matilda. Matilda, please unmute yourself and speak.
Yeah, hi. You spoke about the design phase where you need to flesh out the objects, build diagrams, and the rest of those detailed Salesforce stuffs. But what if you find yourself in an environment where there's a technical lead that handles all of that level of Salesforce designing? Then you also have the business analyst that gather the requirements and document it. But your role is to document the technical requirements. So how do you go about it that you're not overlapping these other two roles?
You're documenting the technical requirement does not mean that you're designing technical requirements, right? So if you just document it, business analysis is like putting into simple English what the technical guys are saying, the jargons the technical guys are saying. Technical guy can say, create objects and create record. You can just say, create data. Data. Do you understand? Data is something that anyone can understand. Record is not something business would understand. Object is not something business would understand. So you want to use basic, simple English. Then again, you still need to depend on the technical guys to give you that requirement. Then you now translate it into common English language that everyone would understand, okay? So again, don't do the job of other people. Always just accept those jobs and translate it into a common English language everyone will understand. My recommendation.
Okay, then I have another question around the license. When you have a license, for instance, you have a feature license like the knowledge user. When you create an article and the rest of that, the viewers that can view this object on the front end, do they also require the same license?
It depends on the viewers, right? Remember, there's a front end, there's a community, there is websites, so many viewers, right? So when it comes to data, it has to go back to your sharing, visibility, profile, all this kind of stuff. So marketing user, for instance, can view campaign record, but cannot, I say marketing user can create a campaign record, but a non-marketing user can only view campaign record. So everything has to do with what you want this user to do. So license could mean just an extra advantage, extra feature, extra capability given to a particular user, but the base capability will still remain. The base capability is the ability to log into Salesforce and have access to objects. However, if you want them to use Einstein Analytics, Einstein Insight, then that's a permission set license you need to acquire. So that does not stop the user from seeing account records, contact records. However, they cannot see insights such as news about the company, opportunity scoring, and all those kind of stuff. They cannot see it because they don't have the license for it. But that doesn't mean that they wouldn't be able to see opportunity records. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay, thanks.
No worries. Okay, yeah, I think that's all for tonight. We still have a quiz, so we're going to go into the quiz. But before we go into the quiz, I believe there are no other questions, okay? So thanks for your audience. Thanks for your attention. We're going to stop this recording in a minute.